The cafeteria overlooking Dock Ring 7 had been arguing about the same news for 3 days. Humanity classified, threat level 11. Below it, Oxaxian war clans, threat level 7. I don't believe it. One young alien's mandibles clicked in mockery, pointing toward a human waiter carrying drinks between tables. Look at him. Does that look like a threat level 11 species? A few others laughed. One Oxaxian warrior could break him in half. Only the oldest alien at the table remained quiet. My grandfather heard people say the exact same thing once, he murmured. That caught their attention. He used to tell me stories from old trade lane veterans who were around when humans first entered the Galactic Trade Compact. They said the galaxy misunderstood humans from the beginning. One of the younger aliens smirked. Why? Were they secretly warriors? The old alien slowly shook his head. No. That's what made them terrifying. He leaned back slightly. The first time humans went to war with pirates, they didn't fire a single shot. His expression darkened. Yet they wiped them out. A quiet anticipation settled across the table. Even the younger aliens leaned forward slightly now, their earlier laughter fading as they realized the old man was about to tell a story. Then the old alien began. For most civilized species in the galaxy, piracy was not considered a crisis. It was a calculation. Across the trade lanes of known space, thousands of merchant vessels moved every standard cycle, carrying everything civilization depended upon. Refined metals, agricultural shipments, medical compounds, and industrial machinery. Trade connected worlds separated by impossible distances, and without it, the galactic economy would collapse within weeks. But trade had always carried risk. Engine failures, solar storms, navigational drift, and many others. Of those, pirates were the oldest, existing long before the formation of the Galactic Trade Compact. Despite 8 centuries of advancement, they had never disappeared, not because they were unstoppable, but because removing them was too expensive. Admiral Corvin Tall stood before the Trade Security Council reviewing the quarterly sector reports. 42 piracy incidents had been recorded across various sectors, with cargo losses totaling 147 million credits. There had also been casualties, 3 confirmed deaths, dozens of injuries, and several crews hospitalized after resisting boarding actions. The council barely reacted. One counselor skimmed the report and sighed. Within projected loss margins. Corvin nodded grimly. That was how piracy was measured. Economically, not morally. The Trade Compact had run the numbers countless times. Deploying permanent military patrols across every vulnerable corridor would cost trillions annually. Maintaining fleets, deep space surveillance arrays, rapid response stations, and logistics networks far exceeded what piracy itself actually cost. Because piracy remained predictable and contained, it was tolerated. The losses were simply written into trade projections as percentages of expected risk. That reality was what kept piracy alive, and the pirates understood it well. Pirate Captain Rath Venn had survived 17 years in the trade lanes because he understood that survival had less to do with aggression and more to do with restraint. His ship, the Blackwake, drifted behind a debris field with dimmed systems, waiting for a merchant freighter to emerge from hyperspace. When a vessel belonging to Velaran Transit Holdings finally appeared on sensors, Rath checked the manifest. Industrial cargo. No escort. Perfect target, Rath said calmly, the ridges along his jaw tightening slightly. Take the engines. The ion strike was clean, disabling the freighter's engines and shields without damaging the cargo holds. The merchants surrendered quickly, and the boarding crews secured the shipment within 20 minutes. Experienced crews usually knew better than to resist. Heroics during pirate raids had a habit of ending with shattered bones, burned corridors, and casualty reports nobody wanted attached to a trade route. As the cargo transfer finished, Rath's new second officer asked why they were allowing the freighter to leave intact instead of crippling its navigation systems. Rath shook his head. That report keeps us alive, kid. The younger pirate frowned, so Rath explained. The company files insurance, replaces what we took, and trade keeps moving. That makes this a cost. He looked back at the drifting freighter. If it stops being a cost, it becomes a threat. And threats bring fleets. That balance had sustained piracy for centuries. And in the galactic economy, stability was valued far more highly than justice. The incident report for the attack near Port Tarsus was processed within the hour, noted mainly for its lack of casualties and relatively minor structural damage. At Vestari Mutual Assurance, the largest insurance firm in the galaxy, the file moved through the system with routine efficiency. The supervisor authorized the payout as soon as he confirmed the ship was recoverable and the cargo fully insured. There was no alarm or formal investigation, as the incident fell well within standard financial projections. The merchant company would recover, premiums on the route would rise slightly, and trade would continue moving as it always had. This was the stable, if deeply unjust, equilibrium that had sustained the galaxy for centuries. Pirates stole what they could sell, insurers absorbed the losses, and governments treated the damage as a manageable cost of maintaining open trade lanes. That equilibrium, however, was about to change. When humanity formally entered the Galactic Trade Compact, the established trading species largely dismissed the event as a routine expansion of the interstellar market. New civilizations joined often enough that the occasion lacked ceremony, as most newcomers eventually adapted to the existing rhythms of commerce. Humanity appeared no different at first glance, possessing respectable industrial output and efficient logistics that quickly drew interest from major trade houses. While their vessels were neither the largest nor the most heavily armed in the compact, it was the sheer complexity of their commercial contracts that finally drew bewildered attention. At Station Helios, Senior Risk Assessor Velkin Mars' crest twitched with growing disbelief as he reviewed the first wave of human filings, specifically a massive policy structure from Mercer Interstellar Logistics against pirate raids. While standard protections for cargo, vessels, and crew were present, they were buried under unprecedented layers of additional coverage. Velkin scrolled through an exhaustive list that included delivery guarantees, contractual penalty coverage, business interruption clauses, and supply chain dependency protections. Every possible financial disruption, from port delay contingencies to third-party liabilities, appeared to have its own dedicated safeguard. Looking across his desk at the human representative, Nathan Oram, Senior Risk Architect for Mercer Interstellar Logistics, who sat with an air of practiced calm, Velkin tapped the projection and remarked, "This is excessive." Nathan offered a polite smile. "It's thorough." Velkin leaned back, studying the man with genuine confusion. "You insure cargo, the vessel, the crew, the delivery schedule, contractual penalties, and supply disruptions?" Nathan nodded. "Yes." "Why?" Velkin asked, narrowing his eyes. Nathan's answer was disarmingly simple. Because none of those losses happen alone. "It usually is," Velkin countered with a frown. Nathan shook his head in disagreement. "No, the cargo was going somewhere. Someone was waiting for it. Someone promised delivery based on it. Someone invested money assuming it would arrive." He tapped the table to emphasize his point. When one part fails, the damage spreads. Velkin gave a short dismissive laugh. "That sounds expensive." Nathan remained unmoved. "It's cheaper than being unprepared." The explanation spread through the station with remarkable speed and quickly became a primary source of entertainment within galactic trade circles. Within days, human insurance practices had become a running joke among veteran merchants. In the docking lounges, cargo brokers laughed over drinks as one merchant from Veloran Transit Holdings held up a copy of a human policy packet. Shaking his head, he remarked, "They insure delays." Another trader laughed in response, adding, "They insure penalties for delays." A third joined in, "I heard they insure losses caused by losses," which provoked the loudest laugh from the group. Across the room, a shipping captain smirked and asked, "How much are they paying for all this?" The broker checked the premium rates, and as his eyes widened, he whispered, "That much?" He turned the display around, causing the entire table to burst into laughter at the sheer absurdity. Another jeered, "One pirate doesn't even need to rob them. Their insurer already has." As the laughter continued, the joke spread throughout the sector. To the wider galaxy, humanity's insistence on paying massive sums just to feel safe looked utterly ridiculous. Everyone understood that piracy was an inherent part of trade, and that losses were inevitable. To spend such enormous amounts protecting against things that might never happen felt paranoid, wasteful, and fundamentally irrational. At the Helios Circle headquarters of Vestari Mutual Assurance, humanity's arrival had become an unexpected source of entertainment among the 12th Division's senior executives. Within their briefing rooms, The board members reviewed the human policy structures with a level of professional curiosity that bordered on condescension. The subject came up during a quarterly risk review chaired by Tarek Vol, where the company's analysts were presenting the first wave of human commercial policies entering the galactic market. Layer upon layer of financial dependency mapping filled the boardroom display, branching outward from individual cargo shipments into manufacturing schedules, delivery guarantees, supply agreements, and contractual penalties. Several executives stared at the projections with open disbelief. "They're paying premiums for all of this?" one of them asked. At the far end of the table sat Velkin Mar, who had been invited to the meeting largely because he was one of the few officials who had personally processed the original human filings. He gave a slow nod. "They are." That answer drew a few amused looks around the chamber. Another executive leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "Humans must terrify easily." Most of the room seemed entertained by the idea, but Velkin remained focused on the display. "No," he said after a moment. "I don't think fear is the reason." That earned Tarek's attention, though the chairman still looked more amused than concerned. "Then what is?" he asked. Velkin expanded one of the policy structures. The display unfolded into a dense web of connected liabilities and dependent contracts, spreading across multiple systems. "Most species insure the cargo itself," Velkin explained. "The humans insure the consequences." A few executives exchanged amused glances. One of them laughed softly. "And they willingly pay these premiums?" "Without negotiation," Velkin replied. That produced genuine laughter around the room. Tarek shook his head with visible amusement. "It seems humanity's primary export is paranoia." He continued his derision. "If those idiots want to spend absurd amounts protecting themselves from hypothetical disasters, I see no reason to stop them." That quickly became the general attitude within the industry. Human insurance structures were viewed as excessive, unnecessarily complicated, and extraordinarily profitable for any company willing to accommodate them. Only Velkin seemed unable to dismiss the matter entirely. He still remembered his conversation with Nathan Oram on Station Helios, and the unsettling calm with which the human had described cascading loss, as though it were an inevitability, rather than a possibility. As the meeting moved on to other subjects, Velkin found himself staring at the branching dependency chains still glowing across the boardroom display. Most of the executives saw paranoid overinsurance and oversized premiums. Velkin saw something else. The humans were not treating losses as isolated incidents, they were treating them as connected systems. He was beginning to suspect the difference mattered more than anyone in that room realized, and where the galaxy accepted piracy as unavoidable, humans simply prepared for the day it touched them. In the end, the event everyone had anticipated finally arrived. It was never a question of whether a human vessel would be intercepted by pirates, but merely a matter of when. For nearly 7 months, however, human cargo fleets passed through compact space untouched. Some merchants jokingly claimed pirates had seen the size of human insurance contracts and decided the paperwork was more dangerous than the cargo itself. Pirate Captain Rath Ven had heard enough stories about humans to become genuinely curious about them. Across the trade lanes, merchants spoke endlessly about their paranoia, about the absurd insurance structures, the endless contingency clauses, and the enormous premiums they willingly paid just to prepare for disasters that had not even happened yet. Rath found the entire species amusing. To him, they weren't just merchants. They were the galaxy's most over-prepared, terrified sheep. So when his scanner officer identified a freighter belonging to Mercer Interstellar Logistics moving through a lightly patrolled corridor in Sector 12, he immediately ordered an intercept. The interception was unlike any other. As soon as the Blackwake, the pirate's ship, transitioned out of warp and locked its targeting sensors, the human freighter didn't attempt to flee or raise shields. Instead, they shut off their engines immediately, drifting into a cold halt, as if they had been rehearsing for this exact moment for years. Rath's new second officer let out a surprised laugh. "By the stars, it looked like they leaked themselves just seeing our ship," he said. The stories were true. A few pirates on the bridge chuckled at that. There was no protest, and not a single round was fired. Rath's boarding teams moved through the vessel with an ease that bordered on boredom, extracting containers of quantum stabilizers while the human crew watched with a mechanical, eerie compliance. Once the cargo was secured, Rath stepped onto the human bridge, his arrogance radiating through his posture. He looked at the human captain, who stood with an air of practiced, unnatural stillness. "I've heard about your contracts, Captain," Wrath sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "All those millions of credits spent on insurance, all that worrying about cascading failures. And yet, you just rolled over and handed us the keys. Are you truly that terrified of a little conflict?" The human captain looked at him, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Conflicts are expensive, Captain. Paperwork is cheaper. We learned long ago that it kills more reliably than bullets." The sheer, cold apathy in the captain's tone snapped Wrath's patience. He didn't want compliance. He wanted to see the human paranoia everyone joked about. Instead, he found a man who looked at him like a predictable variable in a math problem. Wrath stepped forward and delivered a sharp, stinging slap across the human's face. "You're the perfect victim," Wrath hissed. "Insured enough that you don't care if you're robbed, and pathetic enough that you'll never fight back. You're not merchants. You're a charity." The human captain slowly turned his head back to face Wrath, his eyes cold and ominous. "Enjoy the cargo, Captain," he said in a low whisper. "You didn't rob us. You just pulled the trigger on yourself. The galaxy was stable because it was cheap." He continued with same cold gaze. "You just made it expensive." Wrath laughed. "Looks like that slap scrambled your brain." Yet something about the human's gaze still made his skin crawl. He turned to his tactical officer. "Blow their main engine couplings and vent their secondary thrusters. I don't want the insurers thinking this was a handoff. Make it look like they actually tried to resist, even if they're too cowardly to do it." The pirate ion strikes tore through the freighter's propulsion systems, leaving the ship crippled and drifting. Wrath disengaged, convinced he had just completed the easiest job of his career. Few days later, the damaged vessel limped into Port Helios, and the humans filed the claim that would set the galaxy on fire. At the Helios Circle offices of Vestari Mutual Assurance, the piracy report landed directly on the desk of Velkin Marr, who found himself staring at the file longer than most claims ever deserved. He had quietly suspected this moment would arrive ever since humanity entered the Galactic Trade Compact, harboring a growing concern that the galaxy was fundamentally underestimating the implications of the human insurance philosophy. Still, the 12th Division's models had accounted for risk aggressively. Human premiums had been set absurdly high from the beginning, with every additional clause, from delivery guarantees to supply chain dependency protections, pushing those premiums into a territory the rest of the galaxy considered laughable. The humans had accepted every one of these costs without negotiation, pouring enormous sums into Vestari's reserves over the last 7 months. Velkin had personally helped structure several of these policy evaluations, and according to every standard actuarial model, the company remained comfortably profitable even in the event of a major piracy loss. This was, after all, the predictable rhythm by which insurance survived. Risk was spread across thousands of clients, premiums accumulated over time, and losses were absorbed systematically. Velkin opened the preliminary liability assessment to review the payout calculations he had personally authorized only an hour earlier. He had accounted for everything: cargo replacement value, crew liability, emergency rerouting costs, and delayed delivery penalties. By ordinary standards, the numbers were already staggering for a single incident, with a total approved liability exposure of 12.5 million credits against the actual cargo value of 3.2 million. It was expensive, certainly, but it was reasonable, and above all, strictly contractual. Leaning back slightly, Velkin felt a flicker of relief. For months, humans had been treated as paranoid fools, but now that reality had struck, the system still appeared manageable. The cargo had been stolen, insurance would pay, and the galaxy would move on, just as it had for 8 centuries. However, that sense of security vanished when his assistant entered the office to announce that the human representative, Nathan Oram, was already there to dispute the valuation. Nathan entered carrying a physical data case, looking exactly as he had on Station Helios, calm, composed, and radiating an unsettling certainty. As Nathan sat down, Velkin folded his hands and attempted to forestall the argument. The approved liability package already includes cargo replacement, interruption coverage, and secondary disruption compensation, all as per the insured value. He noted, emphasizing that 12 million credits against the actual cargo value of 3.2 million credits for a single piracy event was exceptionally generous by company standards. "Yes," Nathan replied with a slow nod, "for the immediate losses." When Velkin countered that the policies covered exactly that, Nathan opened the case to reveal a dense web of financial reports, manufacturing schedules, and industrial contract trees. "You processed the direct exposure," Nathan explained calmly as he slid the documents forward. "This is the cascading exposure." Genuine unease settled into Velkin's chest as he began to read. The stolen quantum stabilizers were not simple inventory. They were mechanical linchpins for 12 separate industrial contracts operating across multiple systems, which in turn fed into 41 synchronized manufacturing schedules connected to 73 secondary suppliers. Because the pirates had disabled the ship's propulsion, the failures were now spreading like a virus. Penalty clauses were activating, production schedules were collapsing, and emergency reroutes were consuming the sector's logistics capacity. Every connection was documented, every dependency was legitimate, and, most terrifyingly, every one of them was covered under the policy language Velkin's division had signed. When he reached the final valuation summary, Velkin stopped, reading the number 3 times before he could trust his eyes. Total active liability exposure, 311 million credits. "That's impossible," Velkin whispered, his voice failing him. "No," Nathan corrected quietly. "It's contractual." He pointed toward the expanding industrial dependency tree branching across system after system. "Your payment covers the interruption. This covers the consequences." Velkin stared at the web of obligations and finally understood the gravity of his mistake. Humans did not merely insure cargo, they ensured continuity. In that moment, the comfortable projections of Vastari's profitability collapsed as he realized this was no longer a simple piracy payout. It was a chain reaction, and Vastari Mutual Assurance had signed every clause willingly. Deep down in his chest, even when he had calculated the initial claim sum to be 12 million credits, Velkin had harbored a persistent feeling that something was not right. And now the crushing weight of reality confirmed his worst suspicions. He paused to think for a moment, the tension visible in the rigid set of his shoulders and the slight tremor in his hands as he finally met Nathan's eyes. "Mr. Oram, a claim of this magnitude far exceeds my personal authorization limits," Velkin admitted, his voice strained under the pressure of the numbers glowing on his screen. "I will be escalating this file immediately to the division head, Mr. Tarek Vall, for executive review." Nathan nodded calmly, as though he had expected the answer from the beginning. "Yes," he said. "I know." Then he slid another data wafer across the desk. "I already forwarded the complete claim package to his office." Velkin looked up sharply. Nathan's expression never changed. "All you need to do," the human continued evenly, "is authorize the escalation." Oddly, Velkin found himself neither surprised nor offended by that. By now, he understood something about humans that the others in Vastari still failed to grasp. Humans had completed their homework months before the first shot was ever fired. They weren't just participating in the trade lanes. They were the most prepared players the galaxy had ever seen. Velkin stared at the figures for another moment, before finally authorizing the escalation request and forwarding the complete claim package to Tarek Vall. Then he looked up, expecting Nathan Oram to stand and leave. The human remained seated. For several awkward seconds, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the office was the soft hum of projection displays and processing systems. Velkin frowned slightly. "Is there anything else?" Nathan looked at him calmly. "There is." Something in the human's tone made Velkin's stomach tighten immediately. And several floors above them, inside the executive chambers of Vastari Mutual Assurance, Chairman Tarek Vall's quarterly briefing was interrupted by an emergency review alert. He frowned at the intrusion, expecting a report of a catastrophic fleet loss, but when he saw the origin, a human commercial vessel and a piracy event, he nearly laughed. Around the boardroom table, several executives exchanged amused looks, recognizing the client immediately. "Another human policy," one smirked, while another added, "After all those absurd premiums, at least we'll finally pay one," prompting a few quiet laughs. Tarek opened the file, and the amusement lasted less than 30 seconds. His expression froze as he reached the total valuation page, looked again, and stood in a room that had fallen deathly silent. Velkin's calculations were attached, along with Nathan Oram's legal references and the contractual dependency maps. Every line was verified, every trigger was legitimate, and every claim was enforceable. As the weight of the 311 million credit liability settled over them, the initial shock soured into a desperate, predatory panic. The board members leaned over the report in a frantic sequence of confusion and disbelief, their voices rising as they began discussing dirty tactics to bury the claim. "Is there no threshold?" one board member demanded, slamming his hand on the table. "Surely there is a cap on how much this company will pay out for a single incident, regardless of the insurance layers." Tarek looked down at the contract with a hollow expression. "There is a standard liability threshold," he whispered, "but the cap is waived if the cargo is classified under strategic dependency freight classifications of level 3 or higher under Galactic Trade Clause 14. A senior member immediately pulled up the human shipment logs, his fingers flying across his interface. He stopped abruptly, his face draining of color. "Every single shipment humanity has registered. Every vessel, every route, every container," he stammered, looking up at the board. "They are all classified as Category 3 or higher. They even paid the luxury surcharge for the classification." The room went cold. "We thought they were idiots," Tarek whispered, his voice cracking as he looked at the branching dependency chains. "We mocked their paranoia and cashed their checks, thinking we were bleeding them dry. But we played right into their hands. They didn't just prepare for this. With a payout this massive and a classification this specific, I'm starting to suspect the humans wanted to be robbed in the first place." Despite the shock rippling through the boardroom, the instincts of corporate survival quickly began overriding disbelief. One executive leaned forward slowly, his expression hardening as the calculations ran through his mind. "We don't actually have to pay this," he said. Several heads turned toward him. He continued, more confidently now. "We bury them in litigation, challenge the dependency chains, contest the secondary exposures, force arbitration across multiple sectors, stretch every procedural review the compact allows." Another executive immediately understood. "A legal containment strategy." The first nodded grimly. "Exactly. Mercer Interstellar will bleed credits for decades trying to defend this valuation. By the time the final appeals conclude, the company will either settle for a fraction or collapse under legal exhaustion." Around the table, the panic began transforming into calculation. One executive was already estimating litigation costs against projected payout reduction. Another was reviewing jurisdictional loopholes across compact commercial law. A third quietly remarked, a 50-year legal siege would still cost less than immediate settlement. And slowly, the room began nodding in agreement. Not because they believed the humans were wrong, but because this was how powerful corporations survived catastrophic liabilities. Delay, exhaust, negotiate, outlast. For a brief moment, the discussion of litigation offered the room the only thing it had lacked since the valuation appeared: hope. Tarek Vol could almost feel the panic loosening its grip as the executives began outlining procedural delays, arbitration strategies, jurisdictional disputes, and legal exhaustion tactics. Bastari Mutual Assurance was not a small company cornered by a contract. It was one of the largest financial institutions in the galaxy, having buried entire governments in litigation before. Perhaps, they reasoned, the humans had simply overplayed their hand. Then, a second priority alert chimed across the boardroom, forwarded directly from Velkin Mar. Tarek opened the message, and the hope died instantly. The notice stated that any attempt to deliberately delay, obstruct, or weaken the settlement process would constitute bad faith liability, suppression under compact commercial law. Additional penalty clauses would activate immediately, accompanied by punitive damages and contractual sabotage litigation that could potentially double the total exposure. For several seconds, nobody in the room spoke. Then the panic returned, harder than before. One executive immediately began rereading the contracts, desperate for an escape route, while another muttered legal statutes under his breath. A third simply stared at the projection in disbelief. "They knew," someone whispered. "It wasn't just about the piracy. It was about this. It was about them." The realization spread through the room with terrifying clarity. The humans had not merely prepared for loss. They had prepared for insurers behaving exactly like insurers. Every delay tactic, every loophole attempt, and every corporate maneuver had been accounted for, countered, and weaponized against them. The more Vastari fought, the worse the damage would become. Tarek felt a cold heaviness settle into his chest, as he finally understood what Velkin had been trying to warn them about from the beginning. Humanity did not think like the rest of the galaxy. Slowly, with visible tension in his hands, he reached toward his console and sanctioned the claim. Vastari Mutual Assurance had not become the largest insurance institution in the galaxy by surviving ordinary losses. It had become the largest by mastering scale. For nearly 4 centuries, Vastari had expanded across the trade lanes of the Galactic Trade Compact until its contracts touched nearly every major shipping corridor in civilized space. Its reserves were vast enough to absorb wars, its credit lines could stabilize collapsing markets, and its influence reached far beyond commerce. Like all institutions of that size, it was not governed as a single unified body. It was divided into independent empires of sector and industrial divisions. Above all of them sat the Central Risk Administration, the stagnant heart of the company, where galaxy-wide financial stability was managed by the Supreme Executive, Merrick Sol. Merrick did not involve himself in ordinary claims or regional settlements. His responsibility was systemic stability. He monitored risk the way admirals monitored borders, looking not for isolated incidents, but patterns capable of causing collapse. That was why the human claim reached the Apex office. Not because of its size, Vastari could survive 300 million credits, but because of what it represented. A structural anomaly with replication potential. Merrick sat in the Apex chamber, reviewing the summary report, while towering financial projections shifted across the room around him. The highlighted phrase caught his attention immediately. Policy architecture repeatable across future contracts. He looked up, his voice cold. Who reviewed this? His assistant, a sharp-eyed alien named Kira, answered immediately. The Sector 12 Claims Division. Tarek Vall and his executive team sanctioned the payout after finding no legal alternative to avoid it. Merrick's eyes narrowed as he watched the cascading liability models. Remove them from executive authority. Tarek and his entire executive tier of the 12th Division. I want them purged for incompetence. They were so blinded by premiums they failed to see a dagger aimed at our throat. Kira made the note without hesitation. And the claim itself, sir? The payout is sanctioned. The damage is done, Merrick said, standing up. What I want to know is whether it is survivable if it repeats. Kira expanded the financial model. The payout itself is survivable, but the pattern is not. This human contract is layered around cascading liability structures, where the cargo was merely a trigger for connected obligations. There are 37 active human trade fleets under similar architecture. If 3 more ships are hit within the fiscal cycle, the combined payouts exceed our annual surplus reserves. If 6 are hit, reserve liquidity begins collapsing. Mariq remained silent as the weight of the data settled. Humans had not invented new insurance. They had demonstrated better insurance. And once the market saw the result, others would copy it. If other species adopted human dependency mapping, Vastari's entire pricing model would become obsolete overnight. Merrick turned toward the panoramic market display overlooking the city sector. Billions of contracts, trillions in active liabilities, a company built over centuries. All vulnerable because a few pirates stole cargo and triggered realities no one had bothered measuring properly. He understood the problem clearly. The company could adapt, raise premiums, rewrite contracts, restrict future policy structures. But adaptation took time. Time pirates would exploit. Time human traders would continue operating under existing agreements. Time more claims could emerge. Mariq returned to his desk. What ends the liability? He asked. The cargo's return, Kira answered. That would void most downstream triggers and restore the supply chains, shrinking the payout dramatically. And what ensures that never happens again? Kira understood the implication. Eliminate of piracy. Merrick smiled faintly. Insurance was never about paying losses. It was about preventing them when prevention became cheaper. And now, prevention was far cheaper than repeated human claims. Merrick made the calculation in seconds. One massive anti-piracy operation. He looked at his communications officer. Arrange meetings with the Trade Security Council immediately, on the grounds of economic security. That phrase mattered. Governments moved slowly for justice. They moved quickly for economic threats. Within days, Vastari began applying pressure. They utilized investment leverage, trade guarantees, political donations, and security funding incentives. Marique knew exactly where to apply weight. Never openly, but effectively. He framed piracy not as a criminal nuisance, but as systemic economic destabilization. The Trade Security Council listened. Then the industrial syndicates, the shipping unions, and the port authorities spoke. One by one, every major economic pillar aligned behind the same conclusion. Piracy was no longer tolerable. Not because morality had changed, but because the cost had. Admiral Corvin Tal received his new orders with visible disbelief: full anti-piracy authorization, sector-wide sweeps, and pursuit authority beyond normal jurisdiction. He read it twice. In 800 years of trade history, he had never seen authorization this broad. He looked at the attached justification: economic emergency stabilization. That was new. But orders were orders. For the first time in generations, the Galactic Trade Compact stopped tolerating piracy. It hunted it hard, fast, and systematically. Pirate stations vanished. Supply caches were raided. Black market buyers were arrested. Trade corridors were militarized. Escape routes were cut. Within 6 months, entire pirate networks collapsed under the weight of coordinated enforcement. At first, Captain Rathven did not understand what was happening. For 17 years, he had survived by following the balance every experienced pirate understood. Take cargo, not worlds. Avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Keep the violence controlled enough that governments continued viewing piracy as an economic nuisance instead of a military threat. That balance had kept men like him alive for generations, and now it was collapsing overnight. The Black Wake drifted through the wreckage of a shattered pirate convoy, while compact patrol fleets closed in from every direction. Across his tactical displays, distress calls flooded the sector, pirate stations destroyed, supply caches seized, black market buyers arrested, escape corridors militarized. Entire networks were disappearing within weeks. Rath stared at the reports in disbelief. Why now? Why fleets? Why extermination? As warning sirens echoed across the bridge and boarding alarms began activating through the Black Wake, Rath suddenly remembered the human captain standing calmly on that bridge weeks earlier, blood visible near his mouth after the slap. The Galaxy was stable because it was cheap. At the time, Rath had laughed. Now, as another pirate vessel vanished from his tactical display under concentrated fleet fire, the rest of the sentence echoed through his mind like a curse. You just made it expensive. For the first time in his life, genuine fear settled into Rathven's chest. The humans had not retaliated with fleets. They had done something far worse. They had measured the damage, and the bill had terrified the Galaxy more than the pirates ever had. The anti-piracy campaign lasted 9 standard months, proving to be one of the most aggressive security operations in recent history. Trade fleets moved under heavy armed escort, known pirate ports were dismantled, and supply depots hidden in asteroid belts were seized and burned. For a while, the trade lanes became cleaner than they had been in centuries. Not entirely safe, but predictable again. For Merrick's soul, that was enough. He never believed piracy could be permanently erased. The goal had always been to purchase time to rebuild the contract architecture and ensure a human-style claim could never threaten systemic stability again. Inside Vastari's Apex office, the legal divisions worked continuously to rewrite policy structures across thousands of active trade contracts. Old liability models were dismantled, open-ended cascade structures were capped, and dependency chains were strictly limited. The entire philosophy of galactic insurance shifted. Every major insurer followed Vastari's lead, realizing what humans had understood from the beginning. A week later, Nathan Oram was invited to the Apex office for a meeting that was not about claims, but personal respect. Nathan found Marique Sol studying a projected policy tree across his desk. Human policy architecture. You saw the weakness in our model before we did, Merrick stated, his voice devoid of his usual coldness. It wasn't weakness, Nathan replied with a faint smile. It was assumption. Merrick leaned back. That is a polite way of saying weakness. For all the disruption Nathan had caused, there was no anger in him now. Only respect. Because what Nathan had done was not exploit the company unfairly. He had simply understood value more accurately. That was rare. You paid absurd premiums, Merrick noted, and still made it profitable. You thought we were buying protection. We were buying leverage. Nathan answered. Merrick smiled, admiring the calculation rather than the caution. Humans had not overinsured. They had identified underpriced risk and secured it before the market corrected itself. He handed Nathan a revised policy framework, simplified and focused, but efficient. Nathan reviewed it and nodded. Efficient. Merrick smiled. Learned from the best. Nathan laughed quietly at that. In all the years Merrick Soul had led Vestari, nobody had ever heard him praise a client before. But it did not end there. Over the following cycles, Merrick began implementing another quiet change inside Vestari. Recruitment of human analysts, human auditors, human contract architects. He had learned that others measured value in objects. Humans measured it in consequences. That mindset was dangerous, and in insurance dangerous minds were useful. Within 5 years, human recruitment inside Vestari tripled. Human actuarial models became standard. Human dependency mapping became industry norm. Piracy eventually returned, as it always did, but it never regained its former confidence. The lesson had spread across the stars. Human ships were no longer seen as easy targets, not because they carried bigger guns, but because every predator understood what came after. The paperwork. As the old alien finished the story, the noise of the cafeteria seemed strangely distant. Even the younger aliens who had laughed earlier now sat quietly, turning the tale over in their minds while freighters drifted silently beyond the observation glass. Finally, one of them spoke. I still don't understand how a species like that became threat level 11. The old alien gave a faint smile and gestured subtly toward the human waiter collecting empty cups near the counter. You looked at that waiter and declared his kind weak because he lacked fangs and armor, the old alien said, his dull eyes reflecting the station's artificial light. But you failed to look at the ledger. Do you know who actually owns this entire cafeteria chain and the transit hub it sits in? He gestured to the small, discreet corporate logo at the bottom of their receipt. Mercer Interstellar Corporations. The old alien gave a faint smile. The galaxy kept searching for human weapons, while humans were buying the galaxy. Around the table, even the younger alien who had mocked humanity earlier found himself staring silently at the logo. Somehow, it now felt far more intimidating than an army ever could.